Welcome back in. That Taylor Swift walk-up music you just heard could belong to only one man, Petros Papadakis, at the Old P on Twitter. You can hear him every single day on the Petros and Money Show on AM 570 LA Sports. He joins us now as he does every single Tuesday in the final hour of the program. Petros, we've got, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, all the games kind of run together. We've got the Dodgers and the Lakers both in action in L.A. tonight. I asked you this question last week, I think. Lakers now up 2-1. The Dodgers trying to win the first World Series since '88. Nationwide, I would say that in general, there has not been a lot of excitement surrounding this Lakers and Heat series. How would you assess the vibe so far as you see it in L.A.?
Well, it's the number one watched thing in L.A. right now.
Yeah.
And I'm no ratings maven, and a lot of people are talking about ratings right now because of the NBA and why they're down and what it's all about. But they're doing a great rating in L.A. In fact, without L.A., which is not really a rating that most people go for in the world of ratings. You know, there's a reason Big Noon, even though it's on the West Coast and it starts at 9 a.m., it's called Big Noon all over the country. It's because we're all adherent to the Eastern time zone in the world of television ratings. So what does that get you? Well, it could be a lot worse, I suppose, for the NBA if they weren't getting a good rating in LA. It's still not the same. I mean, the city's not awash with buzz. I think there's a few reasons for that. Number one, I just don't know how well the people, I mean, Kyle Kuzma is the most germane to the Laker organization player out there. Everybody else just showed up, and they're not here or interacting with fans or really interacting with our media in the same way that they normally would. So there does feel like a disconnect. For me, it's a really big disconnect between basketball and the other sports. But people in L.A. are into it. And then you have San Diego versus L.A., which is a very interesting rivalry this year. It's not really a rivalry, and I don't know if you've ever even been to San Diego, Clay, but it's not a rivalry for people in LA. It's a very incongruous relationship. It's like the most popular kid in school and this other guy who hates him, and the most popular kid barely recognizes him. And that's really the way it is with LA and San Diego. There's a tremendous amount of vitriol from San Diego towards the city of Los Angeles for myriad reasons.
Which wasn't helped, by the way, by the Chargers leaving to go to L.A. I have been to San Diego. Love it there. Been 4 or 5 times in my life. And it's a really fun place to visit, but it definitely has a different vibe than L.A. does.
Yeah, and it has this, I mean, for people in L.A., San Diego's where you go to college or date a girl or move to get out of town. I mean, San Diego is not an offensive place. But to San Diego, Los Angeles very much is.
Yes.
And it's very, very similar between the Padres and the Dodgers. And this year in particular, the Padres have shown a lot of excitement and a lot of flair when taking on the Dodgers. They get really riled up to do it, and it's going to be interesting. Just as interesting as the Astros and the A's who hate each other. I mean, Fernando Tatis is a great player. Corey Seager's had a great year. Mookie Betts, we'll see if this is the year he's the difference maker. Clayton Kershaw was flawless in the last series at Dodger Stadium. Both teams rely on home runs, though, and this is a much bigger park in Arlington, and that will play a factor into it as well. But it really is the geographical part of it, but happening in Texas, which makes it kind of interesting. And I don't know if we'll feel detached like we do with the bubble in the NBA. You know, watching playoff games in Chavez Ravine is a pretty comfortable thing for Angelinos, but now that changes after this last series.
It is kind of interesting to move it to Texas and be playing. Fernando Tatis
Well,
Jr.
especially with the Astros and the A's playing in Dodger Stadium with a bunch of Dodger cutouts, including you and Danny G.
No, I don't know. I don't know if we're there. We never have seen any.
You're there somewhere, but
I don't know that that's true. We never got any evidence. We never got any evidence that we were actually placed in the and they won't even respond to our emails. So it's an unbelievable lack of amount of disrespect that we've been shown by the Dodgers. I don't want to put a curse on the Dodgers, but I feel like I need to. Danny G and Roberto are big Dodger fans, and they weren't willing to put us out there at all. We're talking, by the way.
Say they've cursed themselves with analytics every playoffs the last 8 or 9 years.
There's certainly an argument there. We're talking to Petros Papadakis, AM 570 LA Sports, is where you can hear him in the afternoons. How much tension do you think there is in this series for that respect? Because the Dodgers have been so excruciatingly close in this Clayton Kershaw era to being able to actually win a championship. They haven't quite been able to do it so far. Does that ratchet up the tension for a game later tonight against the Padres to a substantial degree, even more maybe than it did earlier in the seasons?
Well, it's a best out of 5 series, so that makes it more tense.
And the first game in all these best out of 5 series, it feels like carries so much additional weight, right? Because it just feels like, I know you got to win 3 of them, but winning that first game feels like it carries so much more weight.
Yeah, and you factor in the point that the Dodgers, unless they win the World Series, they're going to be a disappointment. If they make it back to the World Series and lose again, people are going to throw up their hands and be frustrated because it's been since 1988. The World Series, NL West championships, no matter how many you win in a row, they're not good enough at this point for the city. And frankly, they haven't been for a long time, and they're getting very, very close. And maybe Mookie Betts is the deciding factor. If Walker Buehler's not a healthy pitcher, they're going to have a hard time and have to dig a little bit deeper into their stable of dudes. But it will be exciting tonight, and I think that series offers a fresh kind of battle between some great young baseball players like Tatis and Mookie Betts and Corey Seager, and we'll see if Cody Bellinger can get out of his slump. And there'll be a lot there, I think, to digest tonight. It'll be cool.
Lakers in Game 3. They came out. They got whipped pretty solidly. Jimmy Butler had a 40-point triple-double. Aberration, or should Laker fans be nervous?
Well, I think people know. I mean, what am I, a basketball analyst?
No, but I mean, you're the expert on L.A. here to talk about big games going on tonight.
Yeah, expert in L.A. in a game in Orlando with a bunch of dudes who have been a Laker for like a day and a half.
Yeah.
I think the Lakers are the superior team. I think most people recognize that, but I don't think that anybody would accuse Anthony Davis of being the toughest player on the court. And he's certainly in a new rarefied air as a competitor in a playoff situation, as a few of these guys are. Jimmy Butler's a dog. I don't know if they would be in the finals if it wasn't for the bubble, but there's something to be said for that, and there's something to be said for that scrappiness. And let's say it gets tied up tonight, the narrative's going to start changing rapidly.
Yes.
Everybody's going to start, all the LeBron haters, everybody's going to start getting after like Rob Parker. Everybody's going to come out of the woodwork and start talking about all LeBron's failures in the finals and things of that nature. So the pressure gets ratcheted up tonight, but I think, like most people, that between LeBron and Anthony Davis, they have a pretty good thing going. I mean, LeBron is freakishly good, and they could just end this thing and pop that bubble.
We're talking to Petros Papadakis, AM 570 LA Sports. Last week when we talked with you, the Pac-12, I don't think they had officially released their schedule, right? The schedule didn't come out till this week. I can't even keep up with it all. But
it came out Saturday.
Okay, yeah, it came out Saturday on the Big Noon show that airs at, like you said, 9 a.m. Pacific, but in L.A., which is where they film it. So they came out with the schedule. Do you believe that there's anything a Pac-12 school can do to get into the playoff, given that they would play at the most 7 games, or has the Pac-12 basically painted itself into a corner by starting as late as they are, not giving their best teams, whether it's USC, whether it's Oregon, whoever that team might be, any real opportunity to get into the playoffs?
Well, Clay, you never know what's going to happen, except for me. I know what's going to happen.
Yes.
Like I told you last week that Leach would beat LSU and then lose to Arkansas. Did he?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And I told you that, yeah, sure, Kansas State and Iowa State lost to a Sun Belt team in the first game of the season, but one of those teams would beat Oklahoma this year. Well, it turns out they both did. So I'm on a roll. But the Pac-12 doing this, obviously doing this, it's better than not doing it. But the Pac-12 with their 7 games is purely about getting paid and just trying to show some desire to play and save some face where they've been pretty much embarrassed. But I think it'd be pretty hard to imagine them really contending with the college football playoff. They're going to try. They're going to make a big deal out of ASU USC at 9 a.m. in mid-November. But, I mean, it's early October, Clay. We're talking about mid-November.
Yeah,
and
it's crazy.
Everybody else is going to be playing between then and now. And sure, it's going to be some fresh faces, and let's go see Jaden Daniels versus Keaton Slovis. I mean, and people are talking about the 9 a.m. kick a lot here in Los Angeles. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, I have, because they're not going to have crowds present at all. And, you know, it's obviously clearly a television-related ploy, but I mean, I can't imagine how wacky that's going to be for the players, but I guess without crowds present, it's a little bit easier.
Well, 9 a.m. is 9 a.m., no matter, where you are. I mean,
yeah,
the West
right.
Coast, one of the big West Coast NFL talking points for years when I was a kid, and now again, because we have the NFL here, is, oh, my God, that 10 a.m. kickoff on the East Coast, the Rams, the Raiders, the Chargers, they're in trouble. I mean, that's been a long 49ers, Seahawks, that's been a long-standing thing, and it's real. And those guys are professionals. And we watch NFL football all the time now with the season going, and you can see that the crowd is a factor, but at the same time, these guys are self-starters in a way. I mean, you don't get to that level without being able to play at full speed at the drop of a hat and protect yourself. College is similar to that, but it is hard to create your own energy as a 19-year-old kid, and you're often looking at the other guys to do that. And I think that's a challenge. I think it shocked those Big 12 teams on week 1. They came out and nobody was there, and those Sun Belt teams are used to playing in front of nobody, and they just socked them right in the face. Conference USA doesn't care if there's anybody in the crowd or not. But, look, like you said, there's 2 reasons to play at 9 a.m. or for the Pac-12, and one of them is so the players can showcase themselves for the next level or just finish their careers, and the other one is to make money. And all of that is through the television. And if they think they can get an advantage at 9 a.m., they're certainly going to pump it up on the network. Then they will. But I just think they just need to play to fulfill the destiny of the guys and get the season over with. And I don't think there'll be much in the conversation.
We're talking to Petros Papadakis, AM 570 LA Sports, Big 12. How stunned were you? I bet you've done a few games at Ames, Iowa over the years, and I know It's a pretty good home field advantage. They hadn't won against Oklahoma at home in 60 years. They pull off the upset, even though it's not a full stadium. It was awesome to see, a college stadium really kind of come alive, as I think uniquely college stadiums do in football when big upsets happen. It's just a great opportunity to watch the college kids and the crowds and everybody else just get ecstatic. But for Oklahoma to start 0-2 is pretty wild. How would you assess what you saw there in general, and what's going on with Oklahoma?
Well, all of those teams have great coaches. Bill Kleiman is a great coach. Matt Campbell is a great coach. Iowa State, just a couple of years ago, with a guy who was playing linebacker and quarterback in the same game.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Beat Oklahoma down in Norman. So they're not scared of Oklahoma, and these teams, they go to war. So number one, I'd say I wasn't surprised at all. The one thing that does really surprise me is everybody keeps talking about how, well, Oklahoma's fixed their defense now and everything is okay. I remember they fired Mike Stoops, and the defense is fixed. And Bob Stoops was a defensive coach, but once they hired Lincoln Riley, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but once they hired Lincoln Riley out of ECU and recognized his genius, they really became an offensive team. And they became obsessed with their offensive numbers, obsessed with winning Heisman trophies, bringing in transfer quarterbacks that really captivate the nation year in and year out. I mean, between Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray, and then Hurts last year was great, and this year we were giving Spencer Rattler the Heisman before the season started.
Yeah.
So that's the mentality of the team. And they're about offensive numbers. They're about quarterbacks and receivers and running backs and Heisman trophies. And your defense is going to suffer. The best head coaches, or at least the most successful, build from the fronts backwards, and they start with defense, and they call a game and practice football with a slant toward the defense. They punt. They do different things like that. Oklahoma, it's just clear. Even though Alex Grinch, I really consider him to be a very good coach. I met him when he was in Pullman with Leach, and he got away from Leach and ended up at Ohio State and then took the job at Oklahoma, and everything was supposed to be healed, and we keep talking about, every time they have one good defensive game, we say Oklahoma's defensive problems are over. No, their defensive problems stem from the head coach and the way he coaches football, and that's okay, but you're going to get your heart broken in conference a couple weeks here and there every year, because Kansas State ain't scared of you. Iowa State's not scared of you. Texas is going to battle you toe-to-toe. You still have Bedlam. You might have to go to West Virginia and find yourself in a fist fight. They're not going to let you out of Morgantown until it's all the way over. I mean, they have a target on them, and I don't really know if they're tough enough defensively to maintain the level that they need to get to the title game. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I totally get it. We're talking to
clearly
Petros.
This year they don't. They're already out of the polls.
What about Texas?
You know, that's interesting too, because I saw Tom Herman when he first took over, and we did their first game, and there was a lot of fanfare, and we interviewed him on the field, and him and I were, there was a sweating contest between the two of us. We both had towels draped over us, and Maryland came out there and kicked their ass. And they ended up having a really good year and identifying Ellinger as the quarterback. The next year, Maryland kicked their ass. They ended up having a pretty good year with Ellinger. And it's just kind of not taken the next step from there. They moved on from Todd Orlando, so he already had to fire one of his coordinators who got picked up for a linebacker job at Texas Tech until USC hired him and acted like they were hiring Dick Butkus to play Mike linebacker. So it's a curious situation. But I just think the playing field is so level in the Big 12 right now. And, there's not a gap between how good these coaches are. Kleiman can flat-out coach. Matt Campbell is a really, really solid football coach. Gary Patterson is one of the most, if he wasn't a loon in many ways, and I say that very affectionately, he'd be the head coach at Notre Dame. He'd be the head coach at Ohio State. Gary Patterson is a defensive genius. A genius. And he carves out secondaries and defensive players and does things there that no one could ever do. Baylor is a revitalized program with a great stadium and great support. That's a tough freaking conference. And right now, if you want to be the bully in a conference like USC was under Pete Carroll, or like UC Alabama or LSU over the years, or Ohio State, man, you better slap people around at the line of scrimmage. You better grab them by the collar and backhand them 5 or 6 times before they know they can't step in your stadium and do anything to you and embarrass you on national television. And Oklahoma just doesn't do that very consistently. And I think it's because, they're kind of a finesse team in many ways, although they do run the ball a lot better than many other spread-out offenses.
Talking to Petros Papadakis, AM 570 LA Sports. As we roll into eventually the Pac-12 being able to play again, how bad does
you mean in 6 weeks?
Yeah. How bad does it look to you that the Pac-12 – you said something I thought was interesting back when the Pac-12 decided not to play. You said whether you agree or disagree with the Big Ten decision, at least it felt like it was the Big Ten decision, right? Like they made it, and it felt like the Pac-12 was just following along in the wake of whatever choice the Big Ten had made. I don't see how, if you're a Big Ten fan, you're sitting around and very happy with the way this entire process played out, because it never really felt to me like the Big Ten ever owned any decision they made.
Well, it felt like
the Pac-12. Yeah.
Yeah, well, both of them really felt like a dumpster fire.
That's accurate, 100% accurate.
Because, and that's fair. I mean, that's the same reason we love college football. You know, I've made this point before on the show, and it's important. I mean, we love college football because of the regionalism. We love college football because we create these arguments with unanswerable questions. We love that Stanford and Arizona State have nothing in common, right? But they're in the same conference. Like, we like that. But going into a pandemic where everybody's splintered and there is no governing body, we were cruising for a bruising. We were going to have a lot of dissension like we still have. Many of these universities are run by governments of states, and many other university presidents are politicians themselves. So we were going to be in trouble getting it together no matter what. The problem with the Pac-12 is they could have been way out in front of this and given themselves an opportunity, just like baseball could have, even though they did figure it out, to be a leader for once. But in order to be a leader, like they claim to be on the West Coast with the best doctors and the best testing and the best facilities and the smartest people and the best innovative offenses and all that crap, if we really are all that, then we should have been ahead of it. But to be ahead of things, you have to have nimble leadership that is willing to take a stand. And everybody was way too scared of the public and political backlash to say anything, including the head coach at USC and all the athletic directors, which is shameful because if they were anywhere else in the country, they'd be advocating for their players. So they all look like hypocrites. And the other problem for the Pac-12 putting the whole thing together is the university presidents. They've sat around, I mean, they're just as much to blame as Larry Scott because they've sat around for a decade while this guy has literally had a conversation while he poured gas all over their stuff and just lit it on fire. And they've stood there and watched the whole structure burn down and told everybody that everything's fine, that it's not burning down, and there's no need to call the fire department, and everything's fine, and don't rush in there to save your belongings. And they're saying that while we're watching it burn to the ground. And so the university presidents, the ADs, a little bit less, and then of course the Larry Scott and the Pac-12 network. I mean, there's no games on the Pac-12 network for the Pac-12 season. Clay, do you know why?
Because they don't have enough games, I'm guessing. Yeah.
They fired everybody.
Yeah.
First of all, the games don't make any money. I mean, they only make money from Fox and the Big Ten, so they need money. That's why they're doing that. And they fired anybody that they have that could actually put a football game on TV poorly like they did. I mean, it's disgraceful. Everybody else is up and running. Everybody else is going to have games. So if the difference is glaring, and it should be pretty clear that it's the presidents and the commissioner that have created it.
Outstanding stuff as always. Fired up Petros Papadakis. We will talk to you next week, my man. Enjoy the games tonight.
Yeah, I'll be around. You know me.
That's Petros Papadakis.